Well, welcome to the podcast, Harriet.
Thank you.
I've been looking forward to this for a while because I first came into contact with you and someone sent me a picture of this spectacular pike, which I can see strategically placed behind you that you did. And I was just blown away by the detail of the fish and the creative flair of it. So I'm really pleased to have you on today.
Thank you. Well, I've actually made two pikes. I'm not sure if that's the one you saw before or not.
Oh, is it? Have you?
Yeah.
Is that you meowing or the cat?
No, I'm afraid she's just turned up.
That's the
It's
first.
amazing. These cats don't seem to mind welding, and I just think, oh my God, will you just please go away? I'm just about to start welding, and I'll set fire to you. But
Well,
yeah, sorry, Jack.
That's all right. We've had dogs, we've had children, but I can
Well, my
safely say
lurcher is
that's the
sleeping.
first.
My lurcher's sleeping in the corner, so yeah.
He might join in a bit.
I've got a fire here for the winter, and the dogs have got a bed in the corner. So yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
That's okay. It's an animal podcast. I think we'll allow that.
Well, the dog is called Finn. So there you
Okay.
go. And I used to have a dog called Pike,
Okay.
and I've got an ex-racehorse called Shark. So we can keep
There you
the fish things going
Yeah.
on for ages.
That's it. Well, let's keep the ball rolling. Where did this idea to combine art and nature come from then? Because obviously you come from a very nature background and an art background, arguably as well. So where did it come to marry the two?
Well, I've always known I wanted to be an artist since I was about 3 or 4, I think. And amazingly, I have ended up being an artist. But both my parents were keen naturalists. My dad was an ornithologist and a writer and broadcaster, Harriet Mead. And he was a bird ringer, and allegedly or supposedly he handled or oversaw I don't know, 250,000 birds were in his lifetime. He died tragically young, only in his early 60s. But you know, I'm one of 3 daughters, and it's pretty impossible not to be inspired by nature when both your parents' sort of lives revolve around it. My mum was a keen botanist, and you just love everything. It's not just birds, it's just all those side of things. And as you can tell from the fact I've got a cat on my lap, we've always had lots of pets. So that's kind of how it all sprang up, really.
Yeah, so kind of that the classic childhood kind of. Everyone says it started young, doesn't it? But I guess it's easy to get infected with that love of nature when you're younger.
Well, we were lucky enough to have David Attenborough come and open the exhibition for the Society of Wildlife Artists on our 50th anniversary, and I was president. I think I'd only been president a couple of years at that point, but his speech, he said that all children have a fascination with nature, and what we need to do is to ensure that fascination continues into adulthood. And I don't know quite at what stage that interest wanes, but it does seem to happen. And I think one of the things that's I feel is one of the very few positives of the pandemic, is that I think a lot of people had to open their eyes to what was on their doorstep. You know, with the lockdown and actually only having a tiny amount of time you were allowed to go and exercise, I think people became far more involved and observant of what was actually so close to home. And I just hope that does continue. And the fact that, you know, just these humble creatures were noticed rather than just, you know, going rushing off to look for, you know, golden eagle or go and see the larger mammals that we have in this country. It's just that delight in just even just an ordinary fly that they found on a plant in the garden. So
yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it as well, where you say David Attenborough saying that we've all got that love and then it just for whatever reason wanes a little bit as you get older. So yeah, I agree, definitely that lockdown has forced many of us to reconnect with things literally on our doorstep. So it's a great way of looking at it.
And with your interest, I do think that children are naturally drawn to water. And I mean, so many memories of whenever there's somewhere, you know, you creep up to see what you can find, you know, little minnows or sticklebacks or whatever. And by the same token, wildlife is drawn to water. So it's not just looking for the invertebrates and the fish and the aquatic life. The life that supports outside of it is amazing. And I actually dug a pond this summer.
Oh, good. Good for you.
And to my embarrassment, it's not finished. It literally just was a case of digging the hole, and it's lined. and then we filled it with water, and I've been too busy to do any decent planting or anything. It's literally just, it looks like an absolute building site of a pond. And to my amazement, within a week of having dug that pond, a grey wagtail turned up. And then about a month ago, I was opening the curtains in the living room, and I looked across, you know, sort of 7 in the morning, and would you believe it, there was a kingfisher. Now, I've lived in this house, or my parents have lived in this house for 31 years, and we've probably seen a kingfisher fly over a couple of times in all those years. So it's amazing. I mean, there's no fish in there. I think it might have been just looking for a diving beetle, but if it was going to put in something on TripAdvisor, I think I barely scraped 1 star for that pond. So I've got to work on that and get it so it's a proper wildlife pond. But it was just so exciting just to see it, and it just proves that water does bring animals in, you know. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. It's a great source for all kinds of wildlife. In terms of your, so what would you, are you an artist? Are you a sculptor? I mean, I guess they're not mutually exclusive.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. So what's your, I'll just make sure I know what to call you. What's your process for sculpting an animal then? Where do you start? Do you have a reference photo? Do you do it from your mind's eye? Like, how do you do it?
Come on, go away you. Well, I nearly always, I hope I've seen the animal. Not always, but yeah, I just basically start drawing using the metal. So I will use some reference images, but also if I've managed to draw those animals, then that's useful. But actually, I start drawing in the metal because I never know what the sculpture is going to look like until it's finished. I really don't, because I'm working in 3 dimensions. I'm working with balance. So often, I'm just starting a kind of sketchy piece of a roe deer. I literally only started it about half an hour before this interview. And so that I don't know how it's going to stand, where its head position is, because I'm trying to find the balance all the time. But I always start with the head. So that gives me the size of the overall sculpture and the proportion. So yeah, with this, I've got the very beginnings of a roe deer head, which is only about 3 wells, and it's probably not even worth showing it. But it's just, oh, stop it, Twink. Yeah, sorry about that. It's my life, really.
That's all right.
So yeah, I'm just building up the shape of a deer's head. This is quite. They're not his ears. That's just, I'm going to cut them off later. But it's just.
So even at that stage, it's quite skeletal, isn't it? Weirdly, kind of mimicking skeletal structure in a way.
Yeah, and I'm a bit of a. I get a little bit evangelical about imagining the way an animal moves, because I think that's probably the nub of what I try to achieve with my sculptures, is actually that moment of seeing something. So when we experience wildlife, it's not on those kind of amazing TV shows where you see all the detail and the story panning out. Very often it's just that few seconds before whatever it is flies away, runs away, swims away. And I think what I'm trying to capture with a lot of my sculptures is that moment before they've gone, that kind of experience of that, the reality of that animal, that life of that life force of that animal, if that doesn't sound too arty. But I get kind of obsessed about the structure, and I'm sure you've seen lots of pictures of fish where someone's got a little bit bored of how many fins they should have, and they just think that'll do. And I wouldn't ever do that. It's not part of how I would make a fish. I'd make sure that I understood that it needs the dorsal fin and the anal fin and everything else that just needs to be on that fish to make it the fish that I want it to be. And it's the same with anything that I make. I might emphasize, hares' ears might be longer than they should be proportionally. But I do want people to realise that the leg of that hare will bend in the correct way, and that you're convinced by the shape of that creature that I've made. Well, and sometimes it gets me into a right old tricky position, because I start chopping things off and repositioning just that tiny bit makes all the difference.
Well, that's
the number of times I've chopped life-size horses' heads off and repositioned them on the neck a tiny bit,
that's what caught my eye with the pike originally, when I've looked at some of your other work, that although there is that artist flair to it, it is still anatomically more or less accurate, which obviously sometimes artists can go completely the other way and it's all kind of all over the place, which is fine. It's art. There's no rules. But I quite like that, but I do like that you've kind of got that. We're like, okay, that's more or less how it should look. Do you
I mean, you could pick it to pieces, and perhaps it needed a slightly larger tail fin or whatever. But for me, it's not until you start looking at fish. Now you're the expert, but of course I'm not that much of not really an expert on fish. But you just realise the difference between where a trout's fins are and a perch's fins are, or with the pike, it's dorsal. Is that still the dorsal fin that goes right back at the tail? I mean,
I think it technically is.
Yeah, but you look at where it is on a pike, and that's all about power, isn't it, and everything else. So it's just you're just kind of in awe of the structure of these things, and you just want to capture it.
No, so, definitely. Is it scrap metal that you use? Is it all scrap?
Yes. Wow. So, well, shall we try this?
Go on then. So for visual listeners, obviously we're recording this, so Harriet's just showing us all the scrap metal in her workshop. I'm
not exaggerating. This is all scissors. Just
wow, that is a lot. Where'd you get it from?
Well, I'm not exaggerating. I've probably 3,000 pairs of pliers, probably. I don't know. But they're all different. I mean, look at the handle of this one compared with, I'm going to make some noises though in the background now. The handle of this one. They're slightly different. This one's longer. It's just, and when you need a curve, you need the correct curve. So it can take ages.
So what's this, just going around car boots and things, or what?
I don't have time to do that. No, a lot of people bring me things, which is brilliant. But also about 3 years ago, it's becoming a bit of a problem, actually. About 3 years ago, we've got a brilliant market locally to here, Swaffham Market, and they have an auction. But also there's stalls that sell, the normal things. But there's some a couple of guys who do house clearance, and they sell nothing but tools. And so probably about 3 years ago, I hadn't been to the market for quite a while, and I'd gone, and suddenly I realised there was this stall there, and it was like Christmas. I could not believe it. And I kept my cool, and I went over, and I just started. I said, "Have you got a spare box?" And they went, "There you go," and gave me a box. And next thing I know, I was literally just piling and piling, and they were looking at me like, "Oh, what's going on here?" Because I'd asked how much they were, and I can't remember what they said. And I said, "Well, I'm not paying that, but I'll gather some up, and then I'll make you an offer." Anyway,
you tell him, Harriet. You tell him.
That was it. Because, well, who else is going to buy a rusted, broken pair of scissors?
Yeah.
Or pliers that don't open, or all this is. Well, the trouble is now they just create a huge pile for me, and I've actually had to start saying no to shears because I have got so many edging shears. I've got a pile this high of shears, but I keep thinking, yes, but I need them. But I had to have a little bit of a word with myself because I thought, it just back off a little bit. It's almost like I can't allow it to go because it's going. How long are all these things going to still be out there? And I'm 50, just turned 52, and I'd like to keep making sculptures until I can't stand up anymore. And you start thinking, oh, I just don't want to let them go. I want to sort of give them a home and and see what I can do. So this is not my main area. I've got a huge amount out in a sort of open fronted garage that I make the big sculptures in, and luckily I haven't had a big sculpture to make for a couple of years because, in all honesty, at the moment I don't think I could because there's no room. It's these boxes of things. So, but it's great. It's great fun, and using tools. It started off because, of course, I was using welded metal, and so you need to find metal. So I was using sheet steel and stuff, and then using found objects on it. But in the end, I just loved using these tools that had a past history in the piece of work. And I like to think that my sculptures, when you first see them, instead of thinking it's made of tools, you look at it and think it's a crab or whatever. And then you realise it's got a padlock in the back, and it's got pliers for pincers and everything else. And that's important because there are quite a few artists out there that do use found objects, and I think sometimes they're a little bit short of the mark. They're much more comical and there's a laziness to the way that they've used those tools. So you're looking originally, what's that? Oh, hang on, it's got bits of this. What? And then you suddenly realise it's supposed to be a pig or whatever.
Yeah.
So I like to think that mine are slightly different to that. But I absolutely love it. I love it.
No, I think you've definitely hit the nail on the mark with that. You don't realise necessarily, like that crab when I first saw it, you've pretty much perfectly described it. I didn't realise it was made of padlock, so that makes sense. I know it can vary, but how long does it take to make a piece? I mean, let's say a larger piece, like you've done deer, for example. How long will that take you
Oh,
to
hang
make?
on, I can't hear you, Jack. Something's gone a bit weird.
Oh, okie dokie. Oh no, we've gone into a time warp. Okay. Oh, are we back?
All right, here we go. We're all right now.
I don't know what happened then. We went through space and time, I think.
Yeah, we
Right.
did. You did sound like something off a 1980s TV show. Bionic Man.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I'll try that question again.
Yeah.
I know it must vary, but how long can a piece take? And I know, smaller ones presumably going to be quicker than bigger ones, but say something like one of your deer sculptures, for example, how long does that take you to make?
Oh, what, a little one or a big one? I mean, a life-size horse takes 3 months.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah.
I thought it'd be longer than that. So, but I guess, is that you toiling away constantly, or are you kind of doing bits? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll rarely have more than one sculpture on the go at a time.
No, that makes sense.
So yeah, and often the big public art pieces inevitably end up with stupidly short deadlines.
Yeah,
so
I can imagine.
So you're just in a mad panic to try and get it done. Of course, I'm by myself. I don't have anyone as an assistant or anything. So the bigger pieces are actually really quite physically quite hard work.
Yeah.
But you just build them up in one place. So I'd make the head first, then I'd make the legs, and then I'd move out to this open fronted garage, and then I just start kind of spacing out where they need to be, propping them up, and just starting to sort of build it all together. So what's so amazing about sculpture, but actually is one of the most difficult things I think, is that because you're working in 3 dimensions, you can't control the view the viewer's got. Whereas if you're a painter or 2D artist, drawing or printmaking or whatever, you can totally control the view of your piece. There are always views of them that people can look at them from all sorts of angles. So you have to actually, it might look great from one side, but the constant decisions that you have to make to ensure that it looks as good as you can get it in 360 degrees.
Yeah.
It's quite a tough one. And the other thing, of course, that we've got to deal with, the cat's back. The other thing we've got to deal with is making them stable without necessarily using some kind of cheesy base. You'll notice most of my sculptures don't have bases on them, because I like to just get the balance of it by using gravity and using, I suppose, engineering. I mean, it's instinctive engineering, of course. I wouldn't call myself an engineer, but it's physics, isn't it? So yeah. I'll just show you if I can get the cat off my lap.
Yeah. Fling the cat out.
This is a swallow, and you can see
wow.
There's some swifts behind me.
Yeah.
But if you look at the way that the sickle hits the base,
it
has to be just there because the bird's there and it's nicely balanced, you see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But also, isn't this amazing? Isn't this amazing that I can make a sculpture and it's welded in that little point there, and that's fine. I mean, it helps that gravity is pushing it down. But you can do that in bronze, because bronze doesn't have the tensile strength of steel.
No.
And you certainly couldn't carve that in stone or wood. So that's why I love steel.
Yeah.
And I'm a construction person, not a carver. So I build it rather than take it away.
So do you ever get to make things that you want to make, or is it all commission based?
I've got a huge number of commissions, which is really flattering, but sometimes it's a bit exhausting, and there's been some poor people who've wasted a long time. Just life takes over at times, and there's people that are just so patient, and I completely understand if they gave up on me. But To be honest, I wouldn't accept a commission if I didn't think I was going to enjoy making it. So there've been a couple of things I've turned down. If someone asked me to make their pet dog, it would have to be a kind of dog that I'd enjoy making. Nothing fluffy or anything really would be difficult. But then I remember being asked to make a pterodactyl. And I just didn't. I thought, well, I don't know enough about pterodactyls. You know, I'd have to do a lot more research.
No.
And I kind of thought, no, I don't fancy that. But yeah, I love making them. But yes, the exhibition that we're leading into, I mentioned earlier about being president of the Society of Wildlife Artists, and we have an exhibition in London at the Mole Galleries every year, and that's what we're leading into. So that's what the swallows for, the crabs going to that, and this wrasse.
Yeah, cracking, yeah.
And I've got a tawny owl and a raven. I'm making this deer as well, a few other pieces. So the exhibition it's called The Natural Eye. That allows me to make whatever I want, really, if you like, because it's just for the exhibition. So if someone happens to fancy buying it, then that's good. But if not, it doesn't matter. So
when's the exhibition on?
The private view is the 13th of October, and then it closes on the Sunday after the next one. I should have looked at what the dates was. So 14th is the Thursday, so it'll be 7 onto that. Oh, listen to this. It's whatever the Sunday after that, so it's on for 10 days.
Okay,
so,
well, I can always
20 something.
Okay, I can always chuck a link in the description, because I think this will be out before that, so people who listen and might want to check that out could potentially go.
It would be great. It would be great, and you can see all the work online. So if you went to the Mole Galleries website, you can see all the work.
Okay, I'll put a link to that in the description as well, so people can have a look at that. Have you had a favourite piece that you've worked on? I mean, obviously you've done so many, but has there been one where you're like, I really enjoyed working on that?
I enjoy all of them, especially if they've come out well at the end. I think one of my favourites would be years ago. It was kind of one of the bigger found object ones, first of the found object ones that I made that I just thought, yeah, this is where I'm going now. And that was a vulture. So that would have been, I don't know, a dozen years ago, probably. And I just really liked it. I like the more unusual creatures, I suppose. So I made a pike rather than a salmon. It's that kind of
no, I'm with you there.
Although a salmon, there's a I don't think fish are a good example, actually. What I mean, I think I'd be more likely to make a hyena than I would to make a lion. That's probably the best way of putting it. So for me, the vulture, there was something really, they're just amazing looking birds anyway, and all that scrap metal just worked really, really well. Another piece I was really proud of was I was involved with the SWLA had a collaborative project with the British Trust for Ornithology called Flight Lines, which culminated in a book. And it was looking at the story of our summer migrants, that come here to breed, and looking at where they'd come from, which is, sub-Saharan Africa. And the BTO actually sent 4 of our artists to Senegal to have a look at some of the sites and to create work talking about the wintering grounds of some of our species. And it's, we all know swallows go south for the winter, don't we? But when you've got paintings of, birds that we're used to seeing in this country in the summer, perched in an acacia tree with a monitor lizard and some warthog, it really brings it into a kind of sharp perspective as to what these birds experience in their lifetimes. Anyway, a lot of the artists of our artists were asked to look at the species that were here in the summer, and I specifically looked at nightjar, stone curlew, because you've got them, I can hear them from the house, they're breeding on the fields out back here, but also cuckoos, because a dear friend of mine is running a project just down the road, 4 miles down the road, where he's monitoring reed warblers. And of course, reed warblers are one of the species that's parasitized by cuckoos. So a side effect of all his hard work finding all these reed warbler nests is that he finds a lot of cuckoos on this site. So I was lucky enough to go with another artist friend of mine, Esther Tyson, and we went and looked at these cuckoo chicks that Dave, my friend Dave Leach, who was doing all this work with the reed warblers, knew exactly when these chicks were going to hatch, because of course he'd seen the eggs arriving in the nest and everything. So I had extraordinary views of newly hatched cuckoo with its flat back. They've got this amazing build to them, these chicks, because they need to roll the eggs or any young that have hatched out of the nest. But we also saw one that was a lot older, completely filling up this tiny cup of a nest. And so I made a piece called Funnel around that. So I actually made a cuckoo chick with a little reed warbler coming to feed it. And the nest I used was a funnel. I've got one behind me on the pike shelf, but like an old metal funnel.
Yeah.
And it made a really good idea of what the nest would look like. And I really enjoyed that piece because I don't often make pieces where there's a setting for the sculpture. And that one, because of the nest, I used...
would make sense, wouldn't it?
I used auger bits and things to give an idea of the nest. But another sculpture I made, which had a setting, was a fish one. And it's called Fishscape. And it was a commission. That was the first pike I made. And it's about 12 feet long. Not the pike, the whole sculpture. And I made 23 different fish. I got carried away. It was a memorial to someone that was a dear friend of the people who commissioned me. And he was a keen coarse fisherman. So they asked if I could make something in memorial to him. And they gave me a budget. And then I spent far too much time on this. I mean, 23 fish. I made little tiny trout, young trout. I made some perch. I made some rudd. I made some roach. And then I had this pike. So there's this huge pike up one end, and then there's all these other fish. And I also made some weeds. So I gave an idea of weed, and then I welded the little fish and the pike onto the weeds, so they're like floating.
Yes.
But also to give an idea of the top of the river, when the weed's long enough, it then goes along the flow on the surface.
Yeah.
So I made sure that everything was angled and then bent to give an idea. So you knew, looking at the sculpture, you knew the depth of the river that this scene was going. So you've got this pike hanging separate, and then you've got all of these fish, and they're all pointing the same direction apart from one, because most fish do, don't they? They hang in the water going.
I think I've seen photos of that. Yeah, no, it's a great habitat piece to kind of show it all off. So yeah, no, that's brilliant. Before we go, I'll ask you one more. So what kind of influences your work then? Because obviously, it's a bit different. There aren't many people doing what you do. What makes you want to do it, I guess? What influences you to go and do
this? This is going to sound really, really arrogant, because I've got a huge number of artists whose work I admire, but it doesn't influence my work. Because I think because I use materials that have such strong personalities of their own, these tools had past lives. These tools have their own ergonomic shape. They were there for a reason. It's going to sound super cheesy again, but it's actually the tools firstly, the animal first, and then the tools. So that's what inspires me. It's the animals, whatever they are, whether it's an insect or a bird or a fish or whatever, and then finding the tools and giving the tools a new life in that piece. So that does inspire me. I mean, just quickly to shoehorn this in, I was very lucky to go up to Argyll back in July because there's a thing called Hope Spot. Have you heard of Hope Spot? It's set it's set up in the United States. I've completely forgotten the name of this lady. She's a really, really revered biologist specialising in aquatic marine, I think, almost like the Jack of America. She's an much older lady now, but she set up these of Hope Spots. So they're all over the world. There aren't that many that have happened, but it's this whole idea of shining a spotlight on an extraordinary, diverse marine environment. And this Argyll Hope Spot project is the first one that's been approved in the UK. So we went up there in July. There's only a handful of us artists from the Society of Wildlife Artists, and there's more. They're going there this month in September. And we snorkeled every day in these amazing locks, sea locks, and just seeing the marine wildlife there. And there was eelgrass beds as well as kelp, and oh god, it was just stunning. So this was Tayvalach near Loch Gilphead. So we've got Dura and everything behind us, and so that's what inspired the wrasse, because they're everywhere, and the shore crab and things. But it was fantastic, and we tried drawing underwater and everything, because I'd actually won Wildlife Trust did an amazing thing where they collaborated with the Society of Wildlife Artists, and they paid, I think in the end it was like 6 or 7 of us over 7 or 8 years. So each year they'd allocate it to one artist, and I was lucky enough to be given this diving bursary. So basically I learned to dive, I think it was back in 2013. So I actually went diving off the North Norfolk coast at Sheringham, which was huge, shingle beach. It was just hard work getting out there. But once, when you're on the beach looking out, it's, October, really grey sea, that really uninviting. But once you're in the water and you look under the water, it's just phenomenal what's under there. And we don't get a chance to experience that. Most people, you do, and I have, but most people can go into a wood and get a feel for the wildlife in the wood. They don't need to identify it or anything, but they can just enjoy it. But you don't get a chance to do that underwater, do you? Not everybody can.
No. It's a hidden. It's a hidden world. I think
it's people like you. It is a hidden world, and it's people like you. And luckily enough, I had a chance to do it. We need these ambassadors to get to talk about what's under there, because until members of the public and individuals understand the richness of what's under there, they're going to be less. They're going to care less about what happens to it. And of course, if you're walking along a beach and there's rubbish on the beach or nasty pollution or whatever, you're going to understand that's going on, but you don't quite know what's living yards, meters from where you're walking, and it's just phenomenal, absolutely amazing.
No, definitely, it is an amazing world, and it's great to see different ways of showcasing stuff, whether it's photography with me or sculpting like you. Well, look, Harriet, it's been fascinating to get an insight into your world and see a little bit about it. And just want to say thanks for coming on.
No problem. I will get welding again now.
Yeah, get to it. So
if anyone wants to see more of my work, I mean, I'm sure you can find it if you just Google. But it's just, as a visual artist, it's nice for people to understand what you're talking about if it's not available on the podcast. But
no, definitely.
Yeah, good luck, and keep pushing those fish species and understanding what's going on. It's really, really interesting.
I will now. Now you've told me to do it, I will. Look, all right. Cheers, Harriet.
Yeah, well, it's an important thing. It's an important thing. Okay. Bye.
Bye.